Hey everyone, it's Caitlin and welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to make some yummy, savory, vegan brunch recipes. I don't know if you guys like sweet food or savory food when it comes to brunch, but typically I tend to go towards savory. However, a lot of savory brunch foods revolve around eggs or meat products or things like that, which obviously aren't vegan. So today I'm going to show you how to make a classic brunch vegan style. We're going to be making some crispy breakfast potatoes, as well as some tofu scramble and some tempeh bacon. All of which things I love in my brunch. Can't speak English, but brunch is good regardless. So without further ado, if you want to learn how to make this epic plate, keep watching because I'm going to show you how to make it now. So here's what we're going to be making today. As you can see, we got our tofu scramble, our breakfast potatoes, our tempeh bacon, and let's just jump right into it. We're going to start out with some breakfast potatoes. I have been obsessed with this recipe and been making it all the time because it's so good. You get the perfect crispy breakfast potatoes, but you don't need any oil to make them. So to start out, you're going to need some potatoes. Obviously, I am using a gold potatoes here. I like these mini ones because they cut up into really cute shapes, but you can use the bigger gold potatoes as well. You can also use red potatoes if you want. I've also made them with red, but I wouldn't recommend russet just because they tend to be a little dry. So you're going to cut your potatoes into chunks, sort of like this. You want them to be about 1/2 inch in size. So just repeat that with all of your potatoes, and then once you go through all your little spuds, you're going to need about 3 pounds in total, by the way. You are going to transfer them to a bowl, and now we're going to add our spices. So I wanted to keep things pretty simple for this recipe. I'm just using nutritional yeast, garlic powder, and smoked paprika, as well as a little bit of fresh thyme. But you can definitely add more spices if you want, or less depending on your preference, but you're also going to add some salt and freshly ground black pepper, and then you're just going to use a spatula or fork to stir the spices onto the potatoes. And because you just chopped the potatoes, they're still going to be pretty moist, so the spices are going to stick to them pretty evenly. And once everything is well coated, you are going to transfer these potatoes, this is my first hack for the crispy breakfast potatoes, into your air fryer. I like to cook my potatoes and my vegetables separately. This allows the potatoes to get nice and super crispy on the outside but soft on the inside. They don't get soggy in the pan, and it's less hands-on time because you just pop them in your air fryer and forget about it. So in the meantime, we're going to caramelize our vegetables by adding a splash of vegetable broth to a pan along with our diced onion. And I've shown you guys this before, but we're basically going to caramelize the onion using vegetable broth. So you're going to cook it down until some gold residue starts to stick to the bottom of the pan. And this is just flavor. You're going to deglaze the pan with another splash of vegetable broth, stir it into the onion, and keep cooking it down using the same process, and the onion will get more golden over time, and you'll get that really soft and sweet but also salty caramelization that we are looking for in classic breakfast potatoes. So when you have about 1/4 cup of vegetable broth left, that's when you're going to add in your diced red bell pepper and your diced green bell pepper. And then once again, you're just going to stir this, cook this down to soften the peppers. We don't need to cook the peppers as long as the onions. That's why we just add them in at the end. And we're also adding a small touch of smoked paprika here, just to give some extra flavor to the vegetables, even though there is already some flavor on the breakfast potatoes. So we're going to do one final deglaze of the pan with your remaining vegetable broth, and then just cook this down until the onions and peppers are still kind of moist. And by this point in time, your breakfast potatoes should be done. Look how nice and crispy they are. I love using the air fryer, but you can also use the oven if you don't have an air fryer. The full recipe is linked in the description below. So you're going to mix your crispy potatoes in with your nice, warm, moist, caramelized vegetables, along with a touch of maple syrup. And this just helps add a little bit of extra moisture and sweetness and depth of flavor to the dish to get those classic, shiny, yummy, crispy, really seriously addicting breakfast potatoes that we all know and love. Sometimes I like to add some finely shredded kale or chopped spinach into here if I want to be like super healthy, but we're going for a classic breakfast today, and this recipe is still good for you without the greens, but you can do whatever you would like. I just wanted to share what I like to do in my personal kitchen as well. So that's it for your breakfast potatoes. I topped them with even more black pepper and a pinch of salt. They're honestly great on their own. I would totally eat this as like a main for brunch, but they're great as a side dish too. Next up, I'm going to teach you guys how to make tofu scramble. And I think I pretty much nailed the most realistic tofu scramble, so I wanted to make this recipe and share it with you guys. You're going to start out by adding a tiny splash of water to a pan, and then you're going to take your block of tofu. I like to use firm or extra firm tofu. You'll find out why later. I don't like using silken because I find it gets too mushy, but you're just going to crumble the tofu with your hands. I just broke it in half to make it a little easier, and you want the chunks to still be relatively big. You don't want to crumble them too finely because scrambled eggs aren't really crumbled that finely. I just do about medium-sized chunks, and they will break down throughout the cooking process as well, or you can just break them up with a spatula later if you think they're still too big. Then we're going to add some turmeric and nutritional yeast to the tofu. Turmeric is purely for color, so we just need a tiny bit. And the nutritional yeast is really for depth of flavor because tofu is pretty bland on its own, and we want to bring some umami flavors to the dish. So you're going to mix this together. As you can see, the yellow is already starting to spread out. Then we're going to add water to the pan, and you want to add enough water to actually bring this mixture to a simmer. I think one of the things I commonly see with tofu scrambles is that they're really dry, but scrambled eggs typically are not dry. They're moist and almost have a sort of sauce to them. So you really want to add enough water, probably about 2/3 of a cup to a cup or so, like you can see here. So there's actually water at the bottom of the pan because we want our tofu to sort of simmer in this mixture and absorb all the flavors from the nutritional yeast and even like puff up and thicken up a little bit more to get some spices. And last but not least, we are going to add some fat because eggs have fat, tofu doesn't really have fat, and you need some creaminess in order to make this scramble realistic. So I'm using homemade cashew cream here, which is really easy. You just blend equal parts cashews with filtered water and a tiny pinch of salt in your blender until it's nice and smooth. And you're going to need about 3 tablespoons for this recipe. So I added them in and stirred them into my eggs. And as you can see, the sauce is already starting to thicken a bit, but you're going to bring this to a simmer and then just cook this down for about 10 or so minutes. The turmeric sort of like activates and makes the eggs more yellow. Now, if you want to add extra spices, you totally can. I like to add some onion powder, some garlic powder, and a tiny little bit of cayenne pepper or smoked paprika. But that's just me personally. This recipe is very versatile. It just makes a basic tofu scramble. So you can add spices to make it more Tex-Mex flavored. You can make a curry tofu scramble. You could even add in extra veggies like spinach or onions and simmer them down with the tofu if you want to cook in veggies with your egg scramble as well. Basically, we're trying to make the same thing as scrambled eggs. So whatever you would do with eggs, you can just do with this tofu. So as you can see, it's looking nice and thick, and there's no more liquid at the bottom of the pan. The tofu is just sort of saucy and more thick like scrambled eggs. So the last step is to turn off the heat and add this pink substance, which is actually known as a black salt or a kala namak. It has a slightly sulfuric taste to it, which surprisingly tastes eggy. But the salt does lose flavor with heat, so you want to just add this in right at the end, right before you're going to serve, so your tofu scramble tastes the most realistic. So just mix that all in with a spatula, and then you can add in extra salt and pepper to taste. I think scrambled eggs usually have a generous amount of salt and pepper to them. That's the way I grew up eating them, so don't skimp on those. I think the seasonings help to make it taste really realistic too. But that is it, guys. As you can see, I think this looks so much more like scrambled eggs than a lot of other tofu scrambles that are out there, and I really think the key is to simmer it in some liquid and allow the tofu to sort of puff up, if you will. And then last but not least, what is brunch without bacon? So I'm going to show you how to make some easy tempeh bacon. There are a lot of vegan bacon recipes out there, and this is actually my smoky tempeh recipe, so I'm just going to glaze over it for you guys. If you haven't heard of tempeh before, haven't seen me make this recipe before, tempeh is basically whole soybeans that are mushed into like a block, and that's basically what it is. It's fermented, it's probiotics, it's good for you. You're just going to add it to the bottom of a nonstick pan and add in your marinade, which is a mix of vegetable broth, smoked paprika, black pepper, and liquid smoke, as well as some tamari and maple syrup. And we're just going to simmer our tempeh. And again, I've said this before, but with tempeh, you want to steam it first before you simmer it down, which is why there's extra water in the marinade. This allows, again, the tempeh to puff up and absorb all the flavors of the marinade without having to let it sit in it for forever, which I just think is really time consuming and annoying. So yeah, you're just going to simmer this in the pan, and you're going to want to flip the tempeh about every 3 minutes or so and just continue to repeat this process. And just like with the tofu mixture, the water is slowly going to evaporate from the pan and the mixture of the marinade will become thicker and start to stick to the tempeh. And you really only have to flip it occasionally to start, but then as you can see, once the water starts to evaporate a little more, the sauce gets thicker, and that's when you want to start flipping the tempeh more rapidly, because the sauce is really going to stick, and you want to make sure all the sides get coated in the tempeh mixture and start to get nice and caramelized and golden, and this is where the magic starts to happen. So as you can see, our tempeh is nice and shiny, smoky and flavorful, and you can serve it like this, but bacon is normally crispy. So one thing that I like to do that I actually haven't shown you guys before is to amp up the crisp factor by popping my tempeh in my air fryer. I actually discovered this by chance when I wanted to reheat leftover tempeh, and I found that when you bake it in the air fryer, it gets a nice crispy skin and even more depth of flavor to it. So I had to show you guys because it's really good and you guys should try it out. So you just pop it in your air fryer for another 10 minutes or so on 360F, and as you can see, it gets really nice and crispy, and it's perfect in sandwiches. You can even chop it up, serve it with your breakfast potatoes, like fold it into the potatoes, serve it with mashed potatoes, add it to potato salads. Do whatever you would normally do with bacon with this plant-based version that's still just as yummy. So that is our final plate. I served mine with some spinach and some toast topped with vegan butter, because I thought those were classic accompaniments to a brunch. But you can do whatever you want. You can make some of these recipes, you can make all these recipes, but either way, they're all super delicious. And that is how you make those 3 recipes. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite brunch recipe is in general, and maybe I will veganize it if it wasn't in this video. So now Dylan is here. We got our brunch plates. I filmed this during the day, and now we're gonna eat it for dinner. You can actually stand up a little bit more. He's crouching right now because I'm short.
My power squat
as well. Hey, it's an extra workout. We got our breakfast potatoes. We got Lily at our ankles, begging for food. She actually ate about a fourth of the breakfast potatoes earlier. I left the kitchen for a second, and her tongue is longer than I thought.
She like turns her head upside down.
What was your favorite brunch food growing up?
I mean, honestly, like pretty similar to this. I do like potatoes with different peppers and onions and all that.
And biscuits and gravy.
Biscuits and gravy are good too.
Gotta make some.
My mom makes some pretty good biscuits and gravy, but that tahini gravy though, dang.
I made vegan biscuits and gravy ones, but the recipe's not on my blog. It's kind of a winging it thing. But okay, we're gonna go eat our dinner, breakfast for dinner. Thank you guys for watching. If you like what you see here, feel free to hit that little subscribe button right down there. I post 1 to 2 new videos every single week, and you can also give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, hope you guys are having an awesome time. I hope you guys are having an awesome day, whatever time of day it is for you. And I will see you in the next video. And Dylan will see you in a future video.
Bye.
Bye.